Okay, let's just jump right into it. In this explainer, we're going to unpack how our very definition of a world wonder has dramatically evolved from ancient antiquity all the way to our modern digital age. It's honestly an incredible journey of human ambition, and by putting these historical and modern lists side by side, we can actually trace the evolution of human society itself.
To give us a little roadmap, we'll start off by defining what exactly makes a world wonder, then head into the ancient Mediterranean marvels, before jumping forward to modern global masterpieces. After that, we'll compare the shift from showcasing power to preserving history, and finally, look at the very real perils of modern popularity.
Section 1. Defining a world wonder. What makes a marvel?
Since literally the dawn of civilization, we humans have shared this timeless desire to identify, rank, and celebrate our most extraordinary achievements. There's this beautifully poetic quote from the Hellenistic writer Antipater of Sidon around 100 BC. He talks about gazing on the walls of Babylon and the gigantic tomb of Mausolus, but says that when he saw the sacred house of Artemis towering to the clouds, all the others were placed in the shade. It perfectly captures the mythic, awe-inspiring vibe of these early lists. Because ancient writers weren't voting. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't even a public conversation. They were essentially curating travel guides filled with absolute awe for a highly educated Greek audience.
Section 2. The Ancient Mediterranean Marvels, the Original Canon.
When you track the timeline of antiquity, the sheer span of it is staggering. It all starts with the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Now, this is not only the oldest on the list by over 2 millennia, but incredibly, it's the absolute only surviving ancient wonder today. Then, moving down the timeline, you have the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon in modern-day Iraq, supposedly built for a homesick queen. There's the massive Temple of Artemis in Turkey, which actually functioned a lot like a busy, ancient banking center, and the towering gold and ivory statue of Zeus at Olympia in Greece.
Rounding out the original 7, we have the Mausoleum in Halicarnassus, the giant bronze Colossus of Rhodes, and the technologically brilliant Lighthouse of Alexandria, which used mirrors and fire to guide ships. But here is a completely mind-blowing fact. All 7 of these ancient marvels existed at the exact same time for less than 60 years. That's it. The Colossus, for example, stood for just 54 years before an earthquake toppled it. In fact, earthquakes and fires ultimately wiped out almost all of these magnificent ancient achievements.
Section 3. The Modern Global Masterpieces, Engineering and Digital Democracy.
Fast forward to our modern era, and the very concept of a wonder has been radically redefined. The crucial point here is the massive shift in how these lists are even created in the first place. We moved from a closed, text-based tradition curated by a handful of Hellenistic scholars to an open, media-focused global event. Just think about this. The new 7 Wonders list was chosen by over 100 million internet and phone votes from the global public. It's a total game changer.
And we really have a fascinating dual view of modern wonders today. On one side, you have the new 7 Wonders list focusing heavily on global cultural heritage. So we're talking about the vast defensive span of the Great Wall of China, the ancient rock-cut architecture of Petra in Jordan, the massive gladiatorial arena of the Colosseum in Rome. Then there's the incredibly precise step pyramids of Chichén Itzá in Mexico, the terraced mountain citadel of Machu Picchu in Peru, the stunning marbled Taj Mahal in India, and the towering Art Deco statue of Christ the Redeemer in Brazil. But on the flip side, the American Society of Civil Engineers created a list celebrating functional, operational masterpieces. This includes the Channel Tunnel burrowing 31 miles under the ocean, the towering CN Tower in Toronto, the iconic Empire State Building, and the suspension triumph of the Golden Gate Bridge. They also highlight the massive Itaipu Dam, which generates an insane 12,600 megawatts of power, the colossal North Sea Protection Works saving the Netherlands from the ocean, and the brilliant lock systems of the Panama Canal. Modern wonders aren't just monuments anymore. They are active working triumphs of humanity.
Section 4. Showcasing versus preserving. The changing purpose.
But you know, the lists we make say just as much about us as the monuments they actually feature. They build a picture of our changing cultural priorities. Geography tells a huge part of the story. The ancient list basically just mapped the limits of the Greek known world. It was a highly confined Mediterranean microcosm. The modern list, however, purposefully attempts to tell a planetary story of human civilization, pulling in breathtaking sites globally across the Americas and Asia.
The inclusion of sites from completely distinct civilizations showcases a democratized, interconnected worldview that the ancient Greeks literally never could have imagined. We are finally looking at a global map of marvels. And it's not just the geography that changed.
right? The actual purpose behind designating a wonder has completely flipped. Ancient wonders were generally built to impress, to showcase current military might and divine power. Modern wonders, on the other hand, are designated specifically to protect and remember our shared past. We've shifted from a mindset of showing off current dominance to saving these incredibly fragile treasures for future generations.
Section 5. The Perils of Popularity, Controversies and Crises.
Now, it's not all celebration. Designating a fragile site as a global wonder in the 21st century comes with some intense political and logistical baggage. The democratic methodology of the new Seven Wonders was highly controversial right out of the gate. In fact, UNESCO officially distanced itself from the whole campaign. They argued firmly that global heritage should never be treated as a worldwide popularity contest or just another commercial brand.
And critics brought up some very valid points. They noted that a digital vote naturally favors countries with high internet penetration and massive marketing budgets. You had nations like Brazil and Jordan running heavily funded, highly nationalistic get-out-the-vote campaigns. It really proved that any list of wonders today is inherently political, shaped by digital access, and prone to commercialization. Plus, major iconic sites like the Acropolis were entirely omitted, which rubbed a lot of historians the wrong way.
So, this leads us to a pretty critical question with real-world consequences. It is one thing to be named a wonder, but what actually happens when millions of people suddenly flock to a newly crowned heritage site?
Well, let's take a look at the ongoing crisis at Machu Picchu. The site recently received a very stark warning from the New Seven Wonders Foundation itself. They stated that Machu Picchu's very credibility as a modern wonder is currently at risk. Why? Because of severe mismanagement, uncontrolled tourism pressure, and ticketing irregularities that are just creating terrible visitor experiences.
Local officials in Peru are sounding the alarm loudly. Rosendo Baca, the regional tourism director for Cusco, highlighted his utter frustration with how centralized administration is failing the site. He pointed out how unacceptable it is that tourists are being mistreated, standing in massive queues, forced to pay only in cash with no digital options, just to use an insufficient number of bathrooms. When basic infrastructure fails this badly, the site's status as a marvel is deeply compromised. And consider this staggering number. 54 million. Machu Picchu generates roughly $54 million annually. Yet local tourism officials point out that almost none of this money actually goes back into site maintenance or heritage protection. It perfectly highlights the incredibly fragile balance of managing a world wonder today. It's highly lucrative for sure, but vulnerable at the exact same time.
Conclusion: the timeless bridge.
So let's bring this all together. What do these changing lists, the grand engineering feats, and all the modern controversies truly reveal about humanity? Well, through all the voting controversies and shifting cultural maps, the Great Pyramid of Giza remains our constant. It stands as a timeless bridge, proving that certain human creations are just so profoundly awe-inspiring that they transcend any list, any vote, and any era.
The big takeaway from this explainer is that wonders are mirrors of the societies that define them. We evolved from a regional, elite focus to a global, democratic one. And most importantly, being a wonder today is no longer just a cool honor. It's a heavy burden. It requires a really strict balance between global celebration and rigorous, ongoing preservation.
So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. As we continue pushing the absolute boundaries of engineering, art, and technology, what monuments from our current age will future generations deem worthy of protecting as their world wonders? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.